Okay, great. Thanks everybody for joining us today for our webinar on cleaning up and optimizing your org and eliminating technical debt with Snapshot. I'm going to share my screen here with everybody. Okay, great. Let me get the presentation started here. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit before we move forward here about what technical debt is. There's a little confusion at times about it, but essentially it's the stuff in your Salesforce org that no longer needs to be there. And that stuff can really start to become a barrier to being able to get releases done and to be able to get your org migrated over to Lightning. And it just causes complexity and confusion in the org that's unnecessary. So this could be unused items like email templates or reports or fields that nobody's putting data in. This could be stuff like profiles and permission sets that aren't properly assigned or aren't set up correctly. It could be stuff like inactive users who are still connected to things in your org. So it can really span a lot of areas when we talk about technical debt. And we're going to show you today how Snapshot can help tackle a lot of those to really help get your org kind of running in tip-top shape. So just a real quick mention about what Snapshot is. Some of you I know I see on the list there are customers, and some of you are new to Snapshot. So it's a holistic org management tool for Salesforce. It really covers a whole lot of bases beyond just release management. That's kind of where we started as a tool, but it's really grown to do so much more. So just to kind of break it down, we do have sort of a clicks not code approach to release management. We can work with repos and diff XML and do all those DevOps things, but it's not required to use our tool. So if you're a consultant or you're an admin and you really like a clicks not code approach to doing release management, we have you covered as well. We do data migrations. We can grab small and large data sets and move them between orgs, maintain all the relationships between that data, and then lots of things we sort of layer on top of that, like we can scramble sensitive fields during a data move. We could map fields to other fields or objects to other objects. We can automatically generate data templates for any package that you have in your org, like CPQ. So just a full-featured data migration tool as well. We do org documentation. We'll hit on that some today because documenting the structure of your org is really a fundamental step before you can clean up debt or things that are in there, right? If you don't know what's in there, you can't really do it. And we highlighted in red for you because this is what we're really focusing on today: org optimization and cleanup, eliminating unused metadata, getting your users cleaned up, getting your profiles put into shape. All of that stuff falls into that category, including to some degree profile and permission set management, which we also have a very comprehensive suite of tools for as well. So when you look at it on the front end, we let you document the structure of your org, we eliminate technical debt, we help you get your security models documented and put in shape correctly. And then on the next side of the fence, we handle your releases for both metadata and data. So a complete org management tool rather than just simply a DevOps tool like a lot of solutions out there. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things we're going to hit on today about technical debt and optimization. So we're going to talk about searching your metadata to understand how it's structured. We said this on the last slide, but we're also going to show you various ways to document your org, the structure of your org. We're going to look at our extensive tools for doing technical debt analysis. So, finding unused fields or pick list values or, really anything, groups, queues, roles, email templates. A little bit on profile and permission set management, because those can certainly be a source of technical debt in your org. And we're also going to talk about cleaning up, disconnected, inactive users or even active users to help get your org, put together correctly. So lots of ways that you can really look at what is technical debt in the org, and we attack it from a lot of those different ways because over time, we've had admins and consultants and developers coming to us saying these are problems and they're really hard to solve without tools that do it. So with that, let's jump over and take a look at the demo here. All right. So now everybody should see my Snapshot tool up. I've got a pretty simple view today. Sometimes you see when you look at Snapshot a real kind of complex DevOps pipeline with repos and lots of orgs all flowing in and out of each other. But today we're really talking about doing org cleanup. So we're keeping it pretty simple. We got a sandbox, a staging org, and a production org that are all connected up together. So the fundamental step when using Snapshot to do technical debt removal and analysis, and really a fundamental step to doing release management, to doing data migration, to doing profile and permission set management, is to take a picture, a snapshot, there's our name, right, of the metadata in your org so you can see how it's structured. That's pretty easy to do with our tool. Our tool is really a visual drag and drop tool. So I can drag and drop an icon for an org on here. One of these blue icons represents an org. And then I can log into any Salesforce org that I have access to. Could be a production org, sandbox org, Salesforce DX, doesn't matter if you're using OAuth or custom domains. You're just going to log into that org. Once that login occurs, then we can take a backup of it. What I'm showing you here is a full backup. We'll take as many retrieves as needed to get around any Salesforce metadata limit, and then we'll stitch those all back together to give you one cohesive backup that really gives you a full picture of how your org is structured. And these could be scheduled as well. So maybe I want to, run this every, starting on, this Friday, I want to run it every Friday at 2 a.m., every week, every day, whatever makes sense, right? So lots of ways to sort of capture that metadata and get that look. And you can also do what we call a partial snapshot. It's the same idea, but you're just going through and selecting which particular metadata you want to back up. So maybe I only want to back up these packages and these profiles or whatever. So if you're doing a really targeted org cleanup or technical debt analysis, you might want to go to the partial snapshot. But if you really want to start with the big picture, I would recommend a full snapshot, a full picture of your org. Okay, so once we've backed up an org, the tool really works off of 2 right clicks, right? I can right click on one of these arrows. So by the way, I can click and connect any org to any org with drag and drop. So I've connected up these orgs. And once you've got the connections in the orgs, there's really 2 right clicks that run the tool. There's a right click on the arrow. That handles all the org-to-org actions like deploying metadata, doing rollback, setting up CI, comparing to see the differences between the orgs, moving data, so all your data migration. So all of those org-to-org actions, or maybe if you're working with a repository, org-to-repo actions, all trigger off of that right click on the arrow. But doing the analysis inside of an org, or working, doing work or lifecycle management of an org, all works with the right click on the org itself. So if I click on this org here, where we're going to start today is talking about first, understanding how your org is structured. So I'm going to go, you can see we put a lot of the tools to manage your org, we break them into categories. We have visualization tools that help you visualize how the org is structured. We have documentation tools that do things like page dictionaries or document, your fields versus your page layouts, lots of different ways to understand complexity and structure. The optimization tools that we'll definitely hit on quite a bit today for helping to actually get into the nuts and bolts of that technical debt. And then also security-focused reports, managing, seeing what your users are doing in the org, tracking down security by any user, lots of different, security-focused things there. So we're going to start up here with this visualize, and we're going to visualize the assets. So what we're doing here is just looking at that backup that we took of the org to see how it's structured. But where the real power is that this is searchable. So here's a list of, all the metadata that exists from our backup. And I could click on any part of it, like I clicked on custom objects here, and that's going to load all those custom objects. If you're into XML, you could actually see the XML for it. You may not care about that, maybe. But you can also drill down. So you can see under object here, I could click fields, and now I could drill down on maybe all the fields for a particular object. Like here's all the fields on my account object. But where this really gets interesting is that any piece of metadata is searchable. So I could come in here and say, all right, let's take this little custom field here. I'm just going to right click on it, and I'm going to say search. And what that's going to do is it's going to present me of a list of everywhere that field is being used throughout the org. It's used on these custom objects, these page layouts, these object translations, these report types, approval process, permission sets, whatever. It's a comprehensive look at everywhere that field is being used. Now, anytime you see a list like this in Snapshot with a simple right click, you can export it in probably any format that you need it in, CSV, PDF, HTML, Excel. But this, we did this for a field, but this could have been done for anything. I could have searched for a group or a role or a flow or whatever it is. And I could even come in here and maybe search for a user. So I'm going to type in a user email here. And let's search for that. So now I have a list of everywhere that user is being referenced in the org. So, here's a lot of dashboards. If I click on this dashboard, I can see over here, they're the running user on this particular dashboard, for example. So again, you could search anything here and understand how it's connected to other things, other metadata inside of that org. So this is a very useful place for doing impact analysis, right? If I'm going to blow away a field, or if I'm going to inactivate or take out a user, I need to know what does that mean for my org? What else is going to be impacted by that? So this is a great place to do that. And as some of you may be familiar with, you could look at profiles here. So I could scroll down and look at a list of my, my profiles or my permission sets here. But that's not really that useful, right? That's how almost every solution shows you profiles. Like, here's a list of your profiles. But it's not really that useful, because what you really want to see is the security per profile for each of the security settings. That's how you make sense of a profile or permission set. So if we go over to the next tab here to view profiles, this is really where we start helping you understand how they are structured. So you can see down the left-hand column here is a list of all the profiles in the org. Across the top, I'm looking at object permissions right now. I can see the security. So I can say, okay, for this contract manager for account, I have to create, delete, edit, read. So I can quickly track down any security here. But I could do that for any part of the profile or permission set. Maybe I want to see the tab visibility or whatever it is. I could jump around and look at any part of the security, and we'll lay it out for you. These can be trimmed. So I'm going to put some, maybe I just want to see these 3 profiles. Of course, with the right click, they can be exported, and we do inline editing. So I could come in here and select things that I want to edit, make any changes that I want, and do those edits on the fly. So actually, when you start to make changes to them, this is a great place to do that en masse, so you're not doing tons of clicks inside of Salesforce. Now, I'm not going to deep dive too much here, because we actually had a webinar on profiles and permission sets a few weeks back. You could go watch that recording. We totally deep dive on all of our profile and permission set tools. But I did want to show them, because when you're looking at technical debt, profiles and permission sets certainly play into that. And the ability to understand how they're structured really makes a difference. And everything that you saw for profiles works the same way for permission sets as well. Okay, so we talked a little bit about being able to search metadata, see the impact of it, how to document your profiles or your permission sets. But when you're doing org cleanup and you're optimizing and getting rid of technical debt, there's a lot of other things that you'd want to document and understand. So one of those, so let's go down here to our right click again on the org, and let's go down to document. Here we're going to look at, now you can see here we have a lot of different ways to document the structure of your org so you can understand it. You could document all the fields versus the page layouts they're in. You could document record types versus pick list, or controlling versus dependent pick list. You could probably guess by those names what they do or how they would document things. We're going to hit some highlights here today, though, and one of those big highlights, of course, is our data dictionary. So the data dictionary is really a place where, well, a lot of people know what a data dictionary is, right? It's a list of objects and fields and their properties and that kind of stuff. We kind of expand that definition quite a bit. So in this case, we're going to work it on the account object here. We can select as many objects as we want. And then here in the middle, I have a list of all the different categories of information that can be added to the report. And when I select one, like summary statistics here, it loads which ones I have available, and then I move them over to the right so that I can add them to the report. So summary statistics are like your counts, right? Like, how many Apex pages do I have? How many triggers do I have? I could actually add the names of them. I don't want to scroll through that today for everybody. But you could add other things, child information, create dates, modify dates, all this kind of stuff could be added into the report. We have org limits as well. So you can see what I've added here, where am I on my storage limit or my API request or whatever. But all your limits are available to add to the report. So it's just depending on what you want to document. So obviously licenses, we could document our package licenses. I'll just add Snapshot there. I think we have probably a good 1,000 licenses since we own the tool. But anyway, any of your packages, where are they with their licensing, as well as your Salesforce Org licensing as well. Let's go ahead and add see what our Salesforce licenses look like. But now we really get into the thrust of documenting the org. And this next part is that we see a lot of administrators doing with cut and paste, like in Excel, right? Documenting your object and your field properties, in this case for the account, right? So I can add any object properties that I want. All of them are available. I'm just adding some here. We can add field properties. So I've added a lot of the things that people like to see, like pick list values or description or help text, a lot of the different formulas and those kind of things that people want to document. But everything's available here, literally every property that's available. So the last part is relationships. So that is like what we saw on the other thing, where we were seeing how things referenced each other, except specifically for fields here. So I could come in here and say, let's look at reports. Sorry, I can't spell. Let's add, reports and report types to see how each of our fields are referenced in reports and report types. Maybe we want to add, how they're referenced in Apex classes and pages, but everything's available here. Literally every metadata type, you could see how the fields are referenced to those types. So most people have, when they're building a data dictionary, specific references that they want to see, and you can add those in here. So let's go run this in real time for the account. I'm going to jump over to the display report here. All right, so here's all our summary statistics. I've got 285 Apex classes and 81 pages. This is a small org. It's a little dev org that we're playing with right now. But yours is probably much bigger, and you can list all those counts there. Here's our org limits that I selected to look at, where they are by percentage, by number. Here's all of our Salesforce licenses, where they are by number. Here's our package licenses. I've used 3 of my 1,000 Snapshot licenses I have in this org. Not 1,000 users in the org, so we're pretty covered there. Then we get into the real thrust of this, the object properties, the field properties. So here's each field. Here's the pick list values for that field, the description, the help text. My org's kind of poorly documented. Hopefully yours is better. Actual formulas in the formula fields. So really any properties that you want to see, we go field by field and make sure that's all documented for you. And then after all of that, we get into those relationships that we talked about, looking at report types, looking at Apex classes, seeing how each field is referenced to those things, depending on what we selected. So this is just a really nice, comprehensive data dictionary that helps you understand how your org is structured for administrator reference, which can be really useful as you move into a technical debt cleanup phase. And a lot of times this also gets used for compliance purposes, but just sort of whatever makes sense for your org. And of course, with a right click, I can export it or share it with the team. All right, so we talked a little bit about documentation there. Obviously, lots of other ways to document things and look at the structure of things. But let's really get into what is kind of the thrust of this webinar, which is optimization. So we have lots of ways to optimize, to understand and then optimize the technical debt in your org. So let's start out with field usage. This is, if you've ever used like Field Trip, this is kind of like Field Trip on steroids, a lot more sort of powerful in what you can do. So I could come in here and select any object or objects if I want to put multiple ones in the report. And then I can decide what records I want to analyze for field usage. So that, maybe I want to build a filter like you would in Salesforce, show me only accounts with, in Idaho, I don't know, whatever, you can filter by anything, just like that Salesforce report here. You could also do it by name, or you could take the lazy approach and just select all records. Maybe if you have a gigantic org, it might not make sense to have a report that big, so you probably want to get into these filters. But in my case, this is a dev account, probably less than a couple thousand records in here, so no big deal. All right, so once we've decided what objects we're going to analyze and which particular records of that object, we can go over to the next step, which is previewing it. So what it's doing now is it's crunching through every field on, in this case, the account, because we selected account, and it's looking at the usage, the field usage for that. So we attack field usage in a couple of ways. Like I said, it goes a lot deeper than other things that you'll see out there. The obvious one that everybody understands is looking at it by how empty it is. So in other words, I have so many records, and if there's no data put in any of those particular, in that particular record, then we know that that's likely a field that's a target to be cleaned up. So, I can come through here and look at any particular fields that I have. I can see, the total number of records. So we have 1,145 account records in here. And so, for example, here for my shipping longitude, I have 1,145 records and 1,145 of them are empty. So this is well, in the case of this org, probably a field that is either not being utilized or is a good target to clean up, right? But we look at things in a couple other ways that are interesting too. One thing that we do is we look at default data. So default is actually really, other things I see don't really address this, but it's actually really important when you talk about cleaning up fields. So imagine that you have a field with a default value and 100% of the records are that default value. That tells you that no one's selecting anything else, right? It's just putting the default value in there every time a record is created. Now, maybe that's what you want it to do, but in a lot of cases, that could show you it's a completely not used or underutilized field. There's data there, so it doesn't show empty, but that data is just the default that keeps getting put in there over and over again. So looking at the percentage of defaulted data is really important too. And then we also take it a step further and let you actually drill down here. So let me just find, I don't know, something here. Let's look at shipping country code. That sounds good. We'll click on that. One thing that we do over here is we give you the drill down analysis as well. So that's pretty cool. So I have, 1,145 records for this. 87.77% of them are empty. 11% is defaulted data. So anyway, as you go through here, you can see I've got a bunch of empty here, actually 1,005, and then you can see how the rest of the values break down there. So helping to understand how things break down by specific value. This also could be useful for marketing type analysis. But anyway, just a full featured field usage report for, getting your fields cleaned up. Now, what's cool about this is I can move over to display report. I could filter this by empty or filter it by how distinct or filter it by default, whatever I want. And anytime you see our reports, we're adding in the capability to pull those out as a job list. So let's say I identify all my empty fields. I know I want to blow those away. I could pull that out as a job list, take it over to our deployment tools. We're not going to cover those today, but for those of you that know Snapshot, know we have very robust release management tools, and I could run a delete and blow those away. And because I took a backup, I've got rollback. So not only do we give you the intelligence to see the technical debt, but we also give you tools to actually clean it up. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some other areas that are highlights here that we could look at under Optimize. So one thing that I think, there's some of these are probably pretty straightforward. Last activity dates, right? That lets you look at the last time a report or an email template or whatever, anything when the last activity was for it. That's obviously could be useful for cleaning up something like a report. If nobody's run the report in 5 years, maybe that's a good cleanup target. We have other things here. You could do Apex code quality and code coverage analysis. This actually analyzes your code for security flaws, stuff like that. This, of course, is what everyone knows, the wonderful Salesforce code coverage, where your percentages are, all that kind of stuff. But what I want to talk about right now is our forgotten assets report. To me, this is one of the major hubs for our technical debt cleanup. We put an immense amount of work into this one. This goes through every single metadata type in the org and can do an analysis on whether or not there are, items that aren't being used. So if you think of it like Salesforce Optimizer, but way more powerful, it covers way more metadata types. There's no limit to how many you can view at a time. And we built a custom algorithm for each metadata type because there's different criteria what would mean it's not being used, right? What not being used means for an email template might be totally different for a flow, right? So we built a custom algorithm for each one. So just to kind of show you how that works, let's click on email templates here. And it's going to crunch through my email templates and come back with an analysis of what we believe is not being used. So we think that these here in red are not being used. And why do we think that? Let's scroll over here. Because for this particular analysis, we look for incoming references, meaning these email templates are not connected to anything else in Salesforce, whereas when we get in the green here, they're connected to workflows or networks or process or portals or what Apex classes, whatever it is. So those email templates in red are a really good candidate for cleanup. Also, we put in other things in here that could be useful, like last modified. So I can see, you know, let's just look at this particular email template. Last modified 2013, not connected to anything in Salesforce. Yeah, that's bloat. That's technical debt. So again, I could bring this out as a job list, all the ones in red, and throw that into our deletes and go ahead and run a delete job and kill those out if I wanted to. Or I could right click here, you know, bring this out, you know, as an Excel file or something like that and hand it off to the admin team or go in and do the work. So whatever you're comfortable doing, we give you a lot of ways to be actionable after that, but we're giving you the hardest part, which is figuring it out. And you could do this for any metadata type in the org: queues, groups, roles, flows, you know, reports. It doesn't matter. We analyze all of them here. You just have to scroll through and select the one you want, let it do the math, and then it'll come back with your analysis. By the way, I don't think I mentioned this before, but every report that we have could be scheduled as well. So I could say, you know, run this every Friday, or maybe run it every time a new backup's taken, and, you know, send it out as a, you know, Excel file or a PDF or whatever makes sense. You know, post it to Chatter, drop it in a folder, email it to the team. So lots of ways to have these things set up and automated so that you can, you know, have them delivered to you rather than going in and doing the analysis. All right, let's talk about a couple other areas that I think are good for cleaning up and kind of getting the org. We hit on some big ones there under under optimize, sorry. Let's talk a little bit about security section, because this is where there's a little gray area. You know, we talked about profiles and permission sets potentially being part of your technical debt. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, for example, if you're an older org, you may have too many profiles, right? Because back in the day, before we had all permission sets and permission set groups, everybody just created a new profile every time someone needed a security change. So you ended up with one-to-one relationships with users and profiles. Then it starts to become sort of bloat in your org. You have two profiles, it's hard to understand it, who's assigned to what. So we give you some tools around that. One thing was what we saw before, tracking down, editing, and sort of understanding your security. But one of the places that's really useful as well to get your security model put together correctly to optimize your org is understanding how things are assigned by user. So we have this profile and permission set report, and on its surface, it does what we saw in the other section. I can click on objects. Here's my matrix for object permissions. Maybe I want to see tab visibility. Maybe I want to see object permissions for permission sets. So I can, again, look at that matrix and get a look at how things are assigned by profile or by permission set. But where it gets interesting is this combined security down here. So down here, I can actually come in and select a security type. We'll go with object permissions here. And I can go over to the next tab, select any number of users that I want to add. So if I wanted to compare a couple of users, I could search for them by profile, by name, whatever, and put them in here. We'll stick with one just to show you how it works. But here, we're getting an analysis, in this case, of the object permissions for this user. And it walks us through how they got to every setting. And we highlight in green anywhere there's elevation, meaning that we've taken from the profile, permission sets have changed their security. And we walk you through it. So Bill's assigned standard user read view. We have these three permission sets that are assigned to Bill that grant all these other privileges. And at the end of the day, his privilege for the account is create, delete, edit, read, and view. So we could take two users and compare them, but really this is a great tool to look through the eyes of your users to any security setting, see how they got there, and start getting everything put together correctly, get your users all having the correct security set up. So again, we did a webinar a while back on profiles and permission sets where we really did you know, a deep dive on this. And so that's something that I recommend you go see if you're doing a lot of profile or permission set work. So last thing I wanted to talk about here, which really falls into technical debt, is managing users. This also is under security. We have something called user permission assignments. Now, a couple weeks back, some of you may have been on our webinar where we did a deep dive on this. I'm not going to do that again today, but I am going to just sort of hit some of the highlights for you here. Sorry, that was not the one I wanted. Just one sec. That's what I'm looking for. User connection cleanup under optimize. Sorry, guys. Long day. So here is where we talked about in the beginning. If you have inactive users that are still connected to stuff that need to be remapped, that's super hard to do in Salesforce, right? Lots of people just have these inactive users that are like bloat in their org. They're connected to metadata assets, their ownership of data, all these problems that fixing in Salesforce is really tough to do. This is really designed to solve that problem for you. You could come in and, like with the other report, select any subset of users that you want to look at, and then you can go through on this tab all of the metadata that they could be connected to. So imagine these three are maybe inactive users. I could go through here and look at all the user permissions, data connections, metadata, like, email notifications, portals, whatever it is, email, where they could be the email in a workflow, for example. That's a real common one, right? In team members, where they could be account team members and stuff like that. And I could just hit it all with a right click and a check all. And then I can go to the next tab. Now that I've decided what I want to remap and clean up, I can go to the next tab. I can select our replacement user. I'm just going to randomly select someone here. You probably want to be discerning. And I've got a user to remap these things to. So I could say, for example, take Josh, if he's an inactive user, go through all of these things, map them to this active user, click this button. We can do a validation, and then we can do the full work itself. So I could actually go through, take an inactive user, remap all those metadata connections to an active user. So this is about cleaning up that user bloat that's in your org. We do the same thing with data. So here's owner cleanup, right? People, users can own records, and you can have inactive users that own records. Now, let's use a good example of how we might do that. Let's say that Josh worked with a lot of cases. So I'm going to look at case here. Maybe I want to leave the closed cases mapped to Josh because he, worked those cases and closed them. But maybe Josh is now an active user in our org. He's moved on, and we want to remap those open cases to another user. In this case, we've got Bill selected still. So I could, again, click here, do that, and it will actually remap all those open cases to assign them to a new owner. You can do this for anything, accounts, opportunities, I don't know. I mean, any data that's in your org, everybody has different use cases, but that's a really good example of remapping data. So the one question I get with this a lot is, could I use this for active users, to remap active users? Yeah, absolutely. Inactive is just a real common use case when we talk about technical debt or bloat in your org. But obviously, if you had a user move to a different department, you might need to remap a bunch of data or metadata items from that user to someone who took over the role. You could remap active user to active user if you wanted to from here as well. So again, we did a real deep dive on this and how to manage users on a different webinar a few weeks back. Highly recommend you going and watching the recording if you are managing or have a big user cleanup job to do. But anyway, I wanted to point that out because it really is part of your technical debt. Having poorly mapped users, especially mapped to like inactive users, can really cause a lot of chaos in an org and can be really tough to manage. So we give you some great tools around that as well. Okay, so I hope that was useful today. As you can see, I didn't hit on everything, but we have a lot of tools to help you document and understand the structure of your org and see where the technical debt is, and then lots of tools to actually identify it and actually manage it so that you can get rid of all that unused metadata. You can remap inactive users, you can get your profiles put into shape, and really get yourself a much more optimized org than you started with. And so that's something that we're really trying to focus on hard with Snapshot, especially lately, is focusing on that lifecycle management in the org. There's very few tools, at least, that comprehensively solve these problems. So that's why we're doing it. So with that, let me jump back here to our contact slide. So if you want a demo, I know some of your existing customers, you have all these features in Snapshot. We don't piecemeal out Snapshot, so you get everything. So if you're interested, if you're an existing customer and you really want to start diving into these, go to that support menu in Snapshot and set up a training. We'll walk you through it and help you understand how to do it for your org or your use case. If you're new to Snapshot or you're not a customer, lots of information here on how to reach out and get in touch with us so that we can show you a demo. We can set you up with a 14-day trial. Also, at Metazoa, we're doing a whole series of these webinar events on different subjects. If you follow us there at Metazoa on Twitter, if you are a tweeter, follow us there, and we'll be posting, all of the webinars that we're doing there. We also post lots of other interesting stuff, white papers and different subjects that we do there, giveaways, all kinds of stuff. So with that, let's jump to the Q&A, and let's hit some of the questions. If you have a question while I'm getting to these questions here, please just click that Q&A button, put them in there, and we'll be glad to address them. We've got a question here. What can be done to clean up or remove fields from custom report types en masse? Yeah, so actually doing the work. So we have reports that will help you identify those, right? Fields by report type. But actually cleaning them up, those fields, you can, the best way to do it is to use our tools to take it out as a job list. And then with our deployment tools, we didn't really show those today. We'll have another session where we really get into the release management. But with those tools, when you do a deployment, there's two sides to it. There's a job list for creation, but there's also a job list for deletion. So you would add those fields to the delete job list, and then when you run the transaction, those deletes will happen to clear those out, okay? And then because you have to take a backup before you do any deployment, you would also have rollback capability. If you had an oopsie moment and decided, I shouldn't have taken that field out or whatever, you could go push it back in afterwards to recover from that. So good question, but yeah, we definitely give you the tools there. We didn't really walk through the actual deletion process. If you're a customer and you want to see that, or if you're a customer and you want to see that or whatever, just reach out to us. We can walk you through it, how it would work. Some other questions here. I got a question on how Snapshot is priced. So we typically price per user, which means you would buy a license for someone who would use the tool, like an admin or a consultant or a developer. Those are generally the target audience. Release manager, maybe. And so you would buy a license for them. It's priced per user, and then of course we'll volume discount. Our tool is all you can eat. We do not break out the features. They all come together. You get all of it. And we include unlimited personalized training with the trainer assigned to you, as well as support included with the cost of the tool. So that's all part of it in there. Okay, so we got another question here. And this one is, let me make sure I understand. Oh, okay. So they're asking, can the field usage that we saw in the field usage report be added to our data dictionary? And the answer is yes. I didn't show that. That's a great point. I probably should have. But when you run that data dictionary and you're going through each field and showing its properties, like its pick list values, its description, its help text, its formula, whatever, you can also add usage in there. So we could show you how many of these fields are empty data, defaulted data, distinct data, that kind of thing. Those values that you saw in the field usage report can be added to the data dictionary. So you kind of get a 2-for-1, right? You get a comprehensive data dictionary report that also shows you usage on the fields. So yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for doing that. That really points out, one of the added values that you can put into it. So yes, field usage inside of our data dictionary report can be done. Okay, great. Well, I think that's all the questions that we had for today. I want to thank everybody for showing up. I hope it was useful. If you're an existing customer and you want to get deeper into these features, just set up a training. You can schedule as many as you like. If you're not a customer and you want to get a better look at Snapshot to see how it could work for you or your company, then all the contact information you see here on the screen would be a great place to start. Reach out to us and we'll take care of you. So thanks everybody. Have an awesome week, and we'll talk to you soon.